Hi, I'm Peter from Coffee Parts, and today we're looking at the evolution of coffee tampers. So the thought process and the tampers have evolved over the years. In the early days, you'd grind coffee into a dosage chamber, click, 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 into a portafilter, and then push up into a tamper that was hanging off the front of a grinder, generally a bit of plastic held on by a couple of screws to the dosage chamber. Some coffee machines even had a tamper built into the machine. Think the feminine old levers where it had that little bit that you just push up and tamp your coffee. From there, you move to hand tampers. And they start off with these little plastic tampers that you'd effectively just push the coffee down into your portafilter. The size wasn't very consistent, the curve wasn't very consistent. But the idea was just to push coffee down so you could lock it in. It wasn't worried about going all the way to the edge, about the gradient of the edge of the tamper, how flat it was, or how consistent it was. From there, you started getting the specialized tampers. Think of things like Reg Barber, who were the hero of tampers back in the day. And they started making not only stainless tampers, but aluminium and brass and copper tampers in flat and C flat. And then you had ripples and C flat and C ripple. You really had 1001 combinations. You had the curves in Euro curve and American curve. Everyone had their own different thoughts. These days, it's pretty much moved to everything being a flat tamper and being quite wide to fit the machine with a very sharp radius. Think the Pullman tamper of today, where you've got a flat stainless steel base, and in this case, the big step where you really are going 58.3 or 58.5, really close to the edge, and not all the way up so you don't get that suction when you pull back. In between those tampers and moving on to the benchtop tampers, there were tampers that were hand calibrated. Think of the Espro calibrated hand tampers. But that's what brings us to these bench tampers. But before we get into it, let's make a coffee with one of the latest ones, the PUQPRESS Q1, and see how they perform in real life, and then we'll go and talk from the evolution from the Mazza all the way to the Slingshot. So to see how we progress from hand tampers to electronically controlled tampers, we're going to jump in and do a coffee out of the PUQPRESS Q1 on one of my favorite machines, the Lever X. So just like usual, pull out your portafilter. We're using the Etzinger Max grinder, which is grind by weight. So we're going to grind out 19 grams of coffee. If you want to look further into this machine, we have done a video just on the Etzinger grinder. But collapsing this, one thing you need to have is the coffee nice and level before it goes into the puck. And pushing it into the puck automatically tamps and you get a really nice tamp. And that's tamped at 15 kilos and you can adjust it. And what it means is it's going to tamp consistently every single time. And it just saves you. I remember having to teach people exactly how to hand tamp and how to feel it, how to polish it, etc. back in the past. Locking it into the machine. With the La Marzocco here, it's a manual machine in the sense that it's a lever, but they've really redefined the lever machine. And once again, we've done a few videos on this machine too. Just letting it pre-infuse. And now pulling it back and letting the lever do its thing. Back to tamping, it really has evolved from a hand tamper to digital tampers. And in between, there's been things like calibrated tampers. But after we have this coffee, we're gonna jump in and really look at the evolution. There's something about lever machines, I don't know what it is, but they do make me smile. So I do love seeing the mechanical and the mechanics of it going. Now, tamping consistently really does help with coffee because it narrows down one variable. You still have to work out your dose and your grind and things like your water temperature, what machine you're using, vibrating or rotary pump, but it does really remove one variable that's really not part of the craft or the art of coffee. It's one variable that, although nice, doesn't need to be there. In saying that, we're diving a little bit ahead, but at home, I still do like using a hand tamper. I do like the craft of it. But if I had a cafe, I'll be running an electronic tamper every day of the week. There's something about the convenience, consistency, speed, and obviously saves you from things like RSI of continuously tamping by hand. But let's put this machine away, bring out the tampers, and really look at how we got to the puck. So if you've liked the video so far, please give us a like, and if you haven't yet, please subscribe. Jumping into these tampers, Mazza were one of the first to make a benchtop tamper. Now with this, it was called a Macap press. This thing weighs a ton, and effectively it's got little weight plates here in the back. The more weight you put into that, the more when you pull down, you tamp. And when it does come down, the actual head of the tamper is turning. Basically, as the piston goes down, it's on the thread and it's turning, so you're not only tamping, but you're polishing. It was very, very revolutionary for the time. Looking at it in practice, you put your portafilter in and you tamp down and bring it back up. Now, this wasn't made in an era where La Marzocco had that ledge here, so it was made for the more traditional portafilters, but the concept was you tamp down depending on the weights you had, and it will polish your coffee on the way down. Macap took that one step further with the Macap CPS press, consistent pressure system. Now, with the Macap, the heads were interchangeable. So if you had different machines, you could change it, say, from a 53, 54 mil of a San Marco to a 57, 58 of most other machines. But they only made 58. At the time, they didn't go wide. They didn't make 58.5. And you could adjust the pressure quite easily. You'd put in your portafilter, push down, it would clip at the right pressure, pull out, and you were done. They were popular. You saw them at a lot of franchise cafes because they were the first real step into consistency and reduced RSI. And then came the VersaLab press. They took the same concept where you're pressing down, and you could, in this case, you could polish your coffee by physically moving your portafilter left and right. And these were run by an air compressor system. So you'd mount an air compressor in a cupboard somewhere, run this lead. When you press down, it would tamp down, and when you press up, it would lift up. So you'd have to press down effectively, turn it left and right, and then lift it back up. Now, we no longer have an air compressor to show you, but I got this tamper when I built my bike inspired machine because I had such a raw machine that I wanted a really raw experience, from grinding where we use the HD1 to the VersaLab press to the machine I built. But effectively, I haven't used it since. Then in 2014, PUQPRESS changed the game on these tampers by introducing electricity into the mix and created this PUQPRESS. Now, this PUQPRESS was adjustable at the back here between 10 and 30 kilos of pressure. And you'd put in your portafilter and it would tamp away. At the time, one tamp, and this was quite early on in the game. We were the original importers of these into Australia, and it was really early. At this stage, baristas were a bit anti them. They thought that you're taking away from their craft. Move forward to today, and baristas love them. They've realized that tamping isn't part of the craft, but more adjusting the grind, dose, understanding espresso, communicating with the customer, looking at milk and latte art. So the thought process from 2014 to now has really changed. Moving ahead, PUQPRESS have evolved, and now have the PUQ Mini, the PUQ Q1, which is here, and the PUQ Q2. The Mini is really designed for home, and the Q1 and Q2 for cafes. Depending on volume, you might go Q1 or Q2. They've also made their M range, which sits under a lot of popular coffee grinders. So you literally go from grind to tamp in one neat workflow. If you add a grinder that grinds by weight to the mix, then you really narrow down a lot of variables. You still have to know how to adjust the grinder between fine and coarse, and to say the weight all the time, depending if it's grind by weight or grind by time, and then know how far you want to tamp between 10 and 30, but it keeps it really consistent. And PUQPRESS has pretty much become the industry standard. Then in 2019, Slingshot came on the scene with a pre-production model of the Kilo, and in 2020, it was released to the world. The Kilo took on what PUQ did, but now you could tamp up to 3 times, 1, 2, or 3 times, and it could adjust the pressure. It was fast, and one thing they did well was the ability to pull out the head to be able to clean it. They also moved to the screen to the front, so the barista had access and control at all times. On the original PUQ, it was at the back, and on the newer PUQs, it's on the side. And they also gave it the ability to clean it really easily. The actual tamp head is connected by magnets, and you can pull it out, give it a clean, and put it back in super easy. Because the developer behind the Slingshot is an Australian, he realized that in Australia, a lot of the cafes had the equipment facing the customer. So in a lot of the equipment designed in Italy or the Netherlands on the PUQ, the switch is at the rear, and basically a customer, or let's say a kid of a customer, can switch it off. So they actually moved the switch to the side and made the rear completely flat. So if you are having it against a wall, it's still nice, and if you have it facing a customer, it keeps it really clean. And that's how the tampers have evolved, from being on the grinder, where you're pushing up, to pushing down, but really not having much calibration, not the right size. Then there was a whole generation of experimentation, especially from Reg Barber, looking at Euro curve, American curve, flat, C flat, ripples, etc. And it pretty much standardized that flat. From flat, you went on from the Mazza to the Macap to the Versalab to the PUQ to the Slingshot, and there is actually a host of a lot more electric tampers on the market. A lot of them have definitely been inspired by the PUQ. The PUQ was the first and really ahead of its time. But I'd like to know what you think. Which of these tampers do you have? Do you use a hand tamper? Do you use a benchtop tamper? Do you use an electric tamper? How do you find it? Which tamper are you looking at? Are you using it at home or in a cafe? Let me know in the comments below. And like always, if this video has brought you value, hit that thumbs up. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe. Thank you, and see you on the next video.